Hi, I'm Terry Murphy for Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, and in the Men's Room with Murph as a senior editor for Realty Times and Women's Wisdom Network. And I have to tell you, one of the things that is affecting the country today is the perception that there is low inventory on housing. But here's the conundrum. Most agents don't really know what that means. They just think that they just need more houses when in fact there's many factors that affect that. Well, I'm here today with Cleve. He's the master coach. He's a speaker, trainer, and consultant for Workman Success Systems, who work with some of America's most profitable teams. He specializes in family-owned brokerages and teams to navigate those challenges that happen, as we know, with families. My favorite thing is Cleve hosts Move Atlanta, which is a weekly radio show on 6:40 a.m. on a Fox News station in iHeartRadio in Atlanta. You know, what I like about you is that you really did sales starting with one of the toughest things, Cleve, and that is selling vacuum cleaners door to door. Bless your heart, it gave door knocking a brand new level.
And did it for a few years up in the area where you were from, in the Chicago
I
area. So
know. I mean, can you find a tougher market? I mean, seriously. So, Cleve, what is this about? I mean, clearly when, it's supply and demand, but you
yep.
really have some introspection that I think management really needs to hear.
Mm-hmm. So thanks, Terry. It is a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy being with you and sharing ideas, and I love your energy and enthusiasm around real estate professionals and the world of real estate. I hope everybody who listens to you ever realizes what a gift they're getting, because you are a true student and you love to understand the why behind everything. And I think, Terry, that is something that in a lot of cases is missing within brokerages, within teams, within individual agents is they don't feel like they're experts when it comes to the local market or, to the little broader, citywide market or whatever it might be. And if you take real estate and you break it down to its most basic, the most basic services we're providing, 20 years ago, we provided everybody access to the information. So if they didn't use a real estate professional, they wouldn't have access to the listing information. They wouldn't know anything. They wouldn't have known what to buy. Well, today, that's not the case. They have access, just about unfettered access to all of the information they want. So what they need from a real estate professional is they need a guide. They need someone who helps them understand all of the data, all of the facts on which they need to make decisions. And go ahead, Terry. I'm so sorry, please.
No, I was just going to say, may I just interject the word expert? In general, agents think they're experts when in fact, when you start asking some of the qualifying questions about inventory and turnover and percentages, employment, unemployment, you realize that they're not even close to that. So I would say not only the consumer needs a safe place to be, and by having an expert, we create a value that cannot be provided anywhere else. So sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to say you're right.
Well, that is so true. And so let's say, for example, you and Don were going to buy a house and you decided that you were going to work with me. And so I'm not an expert in the sense that I will tell you what to do, although I would be happy to tell you what I would do in your shoes. But it's my job to make sure you're adult, so you can make decisions yourself. The problem is when somebody buys or sells something as expensive, as significant as a piece of real estate, and they don't have all the facts. And so they learn something 3 or 4 months after closing that they wish they had learned before. And that's not fair to them. It's not fair to them at all. So if you're okay with this, let's kind of back into, what does a low inventory market mean? I know to an average agent, to an average consumer, it means multiple offers on individual properties. It means heartache for buyers who, find the property that they think is absolutely perfect. It means heartache and inconsistent income for real estate agents. And so low inventory markets tend to make everybody feel stuck, Terry. It makes them feel stuck. And so let's define what a low inventory market is. So we look at, and just as every agent should, the months of inventory in a market area. And what that means is, and you always have to look back 12 months. You can't look back 3 months or 2 months or 6 months. You have to look back 12 months because you have to see the average of the seasonality of the real estate market in that area. And so we look and we see, number one, how many sales took place over the last 12 months. And so let's just say that we have a market area where you had 100 sales that took place over the last 12 months. And let's just say maybe we're only concentrating on an elementary school district because we know that's how this particular consumer is going to search for homes, only in this elementary school district. And
Exactly.
we're only looking for 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 2-car garage, full basement. So now we've defined the inventory. So we're only using the inventory that looks exactly like that. And so let's say you've had 100 of those homes sold in the last 12 months in that market area. That means 8.33 have sold every single month. So if, for example, you had 12 homes that match that same criteria on the market today, then you can tell if it would take 8.33, if you would sell 8.33 homes a month, then it would take a month and a half or 6 weeks to sell the 12 homes that were listed. And so that's how you determine months of inventory. Now there's some changing things. Number one, you do have more inventory that flows into the market, and you have to understand what that is. And so it's not like it's a fixed, meaning it can go from a seller's market to a buyer's market. So let's talk levels of inventory, if that's okay. So if you have less than 4 months worth of inventory, my definition is that it is a seller's market. Now, if you listen to national economists, they'll say 6 months worth of inventory is a balanced market. The reality is that I do not agree with that at all. I think 4 and 5 months worth of inventory is a balanced market. Over 5 months worth of inventory would be considered a buyer's market. And my rationale for saying that in order to be a seller's market, it has to be under 4%, Terry, 4 months, Terry, is because if you put a home on the market and it takes 4 or 5 months to sell it, I assure you the seller does not feel like they're in a balanced market. Not today. Maybe if we were in more of a normalized time.
That makes a real good analogy, because if you've ever had to put your house on the market and keep it up for 4 months, it is a long road.
It's a long time for a seller to keep a house up for several weeks. And so they start to feel like they're at a disadvantage. So everybody I think understands how being in a time of low inventory helps a seller. But I want to make sure that everybody is able to explain that, because when you're speaking directly with a seller, the seller needs to understand the benefit of having less competition, and they need to understand it from their perspective. So the reality is, Terry, if you and Don were listing a home and I told you that you only had 1.5 months worth of inventory, like we just discussed on our example in that elementary school district, and so I knew that based on the way people would search for homes where they would find yours, that they would only have 6 weeks worth of inventory, meaning everything that's listed today would be gone in 6 weeks. Well, what that does is it increases the perceived value of all of the inventory in that school district because of the lack of inventory. So when you think about it, Terry, because somebody has less choices, they will tend to like yours more than they would if they had more choices.
Now that makes sense, but I don't think people think like that.
No, I don't think they do. Well, it's kind of difficult when you think about it, because you're having to put yourself in the mind of the buyer. But if buyer Miss A and Mr. B, if they're trying to buy a home and they have lost out on 2 or 3 homes, then they get more serious. They see more value in homes in the future. Does that make sense? And so sometimes they just go a little crazy and they'll pay more than something is actually worth. So I would say, Terry and Don, the reality is a low inventory market puts buyers in a position where they might pay you more than your house is worth, because it's the only way they're going to get it, out from under someone else. And then you as a seller would understand, oh my gosh, that really seems like it might be worth moving forward, or might be worth the risk of having people who might have COVID in my home. All the things that people might think about in today's world, it might make it worth it.
That makes some really good sense. And I think if we could articulate that to our sellers, they would understand as well that it is a good time to market a property, especially if the inventory is not as lush as it would be in a slower market. But I don't know that particular dialogue has ever really been communicated that way. Tell us, how would the agent look at that? Would they just go back into MLS and kind of search for what sold over a period of time so they could actually validate this to a seller? I think part of it can't be observation or opinion that there's those behavioral styles that want to see the data.
No, you have to, well, and even those who don't want to see the data need to know that you have it. So,
Ah,
so,
nice
so,
distinction, Cleve.
yeah. So they need to know that you know it. So, the easiest way to do it, and let's take that example, 5 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, 2-car garage, finished basement in a particular school district. It would be very easy to go in, put that criteria into your listing service and say, hey, show me how many that meet this criteria sold within the last 12 months. And then show me how many that meet this criteria are available today. So it's really a fairly simple thing. And the reality is that you could either scribble some numbers on a piece of paper and take it to the listing appointment with you, or maybe you would do a little chart in Excel to show people. There are services out there, third-party services, that'll help you figure out all this information. They're not going to give any agent anywhere, anytime, as much flexibility and ability to do different numbers and different research as just to go into the listing service. Because remember, as a real estate agent, you have access to more data than anybody anywhere, because you have every data field on all of those listings. You know, Zillow doesn't, realtor.com doesn't, nobody has all the data fields except the listing service.
And so that's a great resource. And I don't know that most agents even think about that. I mean, the traditional competitive market analysis will give some kind of a snapshot. I always like to encourage our coaching clients to go back and look at um, the sequence of sales and when they actually went under contract to when they closed, and the percentage of listing to actual sales price, so that they can create that expertise through safety and trust, because it's validated as well and not just opinion.
Absolutely. Well, let me add, if you don't mind me building on that, because that is such a great point. And not everybody's a data nut, but everybody is going to like to know sort of their odds, meaning like, what are my odds? And so there's several numbers that I think you need to go into a listing appointment with, since we're focusing on the seller side. And that is, first of all, what I call the market efficiency or the market effectiveness ratio. And that is the percentage of homes listed in the last year that sold and closed during the first listing period. So what people think, Terry, is that every home in every market sells immediately as soon as it's listed. That is not accurate. I happen to be in Metro Atlanta. You're in Tennessee. The markets will be different both places, but in Atlanta, only about 68 or 69% of the homes listed actually sell and close during that first listing period, which, if you think about it, means there's a 30% chance that it will not be successful. Now, I want you to think about that for just a second. You and Don are my sellers. I come and I show you that almost a third of the homes that are listed do not sell and close during the first listing period. Then they got to make some improvements, or then they got to make some price adjustments, or then they got to clean up their smelly socks that they should have been cleaned up for the last 3 months. And so what happens is the sales, what you're trying to sell someone as the benefit is not just selling the home that they think anybody can do. You're selling them the benefit of keeping them out of the almost third of the homes that don't sell. It's
And
amazing.
that's just so brilliant. And it's so the differentiation is amazing, because you know what the usual, because we talk to hundreds of agents all the time, what the average delivery is for a listing presentation to a seller. This is what listed, this is what's pending, this is what's sold. But when you bring in a perspective that lets them know that there are issues when properties don't sell, and then you could go a step farther and say, and when they, and that 30% that did not sell, when it was relisted, which of course is another whole process, you know, what were the differentiators? Price was adjusted, there were improvements made, maybe finding an agent who actually marketed the property, that kind of thing.
Right. Who didn't just think you could throw it in the listing service and leave it alone. So you're going to tell somebody months of inventory. You're going to tell somebody the market efficiency or the market effectiveness ratio. You can use whichever you want. It's just something I made up, Terry. So it's not like an official term out there, but it is something we need to talk about. You also need to do the average list price, the average sales price to original list price ratio, but you need to do the sales price to the final list price ratio. So you can see how much prices dropped before they went under contract, before they sold. Another couple of numbers that I would want to be aware of is what would be the average total days on the market, not the average days on the market, the average total days. So in most listing services, those are two different numbers. And so the total days will go get past listings and add them all together. The average days on the market is just that last listing. So you want to know what that average days on the market, you want to know from the low to the high, because you want to stay out of the high. You don't necessarily need to be in the low, because that might mean you priced it too low, but you need to stay out of the high. And then the last thing I think you need to be able to do when you walk into a presentation, and this has nothing to do with low inventory or high inventory, but you need to be able to show somebody very clearly what the concessions were. In most cases, listing services are keeping up with the seller's contribution toward closing cost. They're not keeping up necessarily with home warranties and everything, but I need to be able to sit down with you and Don and say, hey, just so you know, average sales price in your area is $645,000. And the seller, the average seller of the 12 that did sell in the last year, or whatever the number is, the average seller contributed $5,245 toward the buyer's closing cost in order to get that price.
And how would you know that?
So in Atlanta, you have it in the listing service. And I think in a lot of areas, the listing services will keep up with that data from a closing perspective. It could be, Terry, that in some areas it's not available, but in our we're a matrix system, and which I guess is a core logic system, and it's just available there for us. So as we spit out the prices per square foot and stuff, we spit out the average seller closing cost. And I really just wanted to do this so that, you know, if the closing costs come in and the price is good and they ask you for 5,500 or 5,300, then I need that stake in the ground. I need that reference to say, oh, see, that's what the average is. Now, it doesn't mean you and Don have to pay it, but it does mean that you should expect it to come in that way and for them to ask for it.
Well, and before we close, I just want to say that that's very interesting. And I never had a problem calling an agent who had sold a property before some of that was available and say, hey, Cleve, you know what? I know you just closed 153 Main Street. Is there anything specific in that contract that would affect value to other properties? When you appreciate your competition, when you engage them in a way that is collaborative, you become the resource to them as well. So I really appreciate your sharing this information.
And Terry, great stuff. When you're talking to other agents, go with a gift in hand. So you know your listing that you're working on, and you just send them all of the information that you use to determine value on your home in exchange for their information. So don't wait to help them after they help you. Help them before they help you, even if they don't necessarily need it.
You know, and that's why we love Cleve Gaddis. He just comes up with these gems. Cleve, I know that you are an amazing resource to the Workman family as well, and all of the many top teams that you are coaching right now. Tell us, if someone wanted to hire you to consult with their team or consult with their company, especially on profitability, because you are just amazing with numbers, how would they reach you?
Oh, thank you. It's really easy. They can just send an email to me to Cleve@workmansuccesssystems.com. It's Cleve@workmansuccesssystems.com. The truth is, Terry, is that I believe I'm probably the only Cleve Gaddis in the world. My name is short for Cleveland. And so if you went to Google and you just typed in Cleve, Cleve, Gaddis, Gaddis, you would probably find 6 or 8 ways to contact me, including calling me on my cell phone. And by the way, I'm always happy to talk to anybody about anything. Not because I think they need to talk to me, because they need my perspective. But all I've ever done, Terry, since the time I was 21 years old, is teach people the process of sales, but teach it from the consumer's perspective. How do you have conversations that land with the consumer? How do you have conversations that show the consumer the benefit of working with you? Not what you do to help them, but how what you do to help them benefits them. And it can be something as simple as, hey, when you use us, we're getting so much showing feedback that you're going to know everything you need to know. We're going to get showing feedback 80% of the time, Terry. So that means, and here's the benefit, when you put your head on the pillow at night, you won't have to wonder if there's something you do not understand.
Oh,
Powerful. It's
oh.
powerful. But see, that's what people are looking for, because Terry, they want to sell their house. They want to make the best decisions, but they really want what makes them feel emotionally better. We all want it. Terry, you want it. I want it. And the truth of the matter is that we spend most of our time, most days, thinking that we're not getting what we want from an emotional standpoint anyway. I want you to
That
think
is
about that for a little
that
bit.
is absolutely true. And why don't you just tell us a little bit,
Yes. Yes.
again, how to hear your show
Oh,
on Your Move Atlanta?
sure. So you can actually, if you can get our podcast on any platform, Spotify, Google Podcast, SoundCloud, any of the different. And if you'll just go in and search Cleve Gaddis, Clevegaddis, you'll find it. The show actually, Terry, we changed platforms about 3 months ago. So it's called Go Gaddis Real Estate Radio now instead of Your Move Atlanta. And we're on AM 920 in Atlanta. So if somebody wanted to listen live, they could go to any of the podcasting or the radio distribution apps and just type in AM 920, The Answer. And I'm on every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time if somebody wants to hear the whole show together, all four segments together.
Well, I hope you'll join us again because we're going to have a series on Go Cleve,
Yeah.
so that we can get all of these pearls. Because I'm going to tell you, training is everywhere, but inspiration and differentiation on how to do what we do changes every day. Thank you so much for joining us.
So Terry, can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Can we do another one of these and then now talk about low inventory from a buyer's perspective? Because we've talked about it from a seller's perspective, but we haven't talked about it from the buyer's perspective and the buyer's agent's perspective. And the issue is I think, Terry, most agents feel like they are being led around by the nose by the market inventory and they don't have any control of anything. But the reality is they do, and it provides tremendous opportunities for them to message in a way that will connect with their clients and their prospects so very purely. And so maybe we can talk about that next time.
Well, you're up for a series, my friend, because you can never get enough Cleve. Thank you so much for joining us here at Realty Times, Women in Business, Women in Real Estate in the Men's Room with Murph. And I hope, Cleve, you'll join us again next week for another installment of Cleve Knows What He's Doing. Okay?
You can count on it. I don't know that I always know, but I certainly act like I do.
Thank you so much.